Welcome to Facing the Canon. My guest on the program is Bear Grylls, adventurer, TV host, and author. Bear, welcome to Facing the Canon.
Nice to be with you, J.John. How are you, my friend? Are you doing okay?
Good heart. I'm in good heart. And I know you are as well. And it's wonderful to have you on the program. Okay, I'm going to kick off. Well, we want to talk about your new book. We're going to talk about your faith, but we also want to talk a little bit about your journey in life. Okay, here's my first question. You were born Edward. How did you end up with the name Bear?
Well, that happened from like 1 day old. I have an wonderful older sister. She's 8 years older. My mum had, I think it was 3, maybe 4 miscarriages. And my sister was always so excited for each chance of a brother and sister. And eventually, after all those miscarriages, when I came along, she was excited, but she was disappointed with the name. And as soon as I came out, she said, I'm calling him Bear. And that's been it. And to be honest, at kind of 6 or 7, I didn't really like it. I used to kind of think I wish I had a normal name. And I was quite shy and I didn't really like anything that made me stand out. But actually, I look back now and over the years, that could have been way worse. It's been a wonderful name. I thank my sister. And that's it.
Well, it is a wonderful name, Bear. It really is. And it kind of goes with you and it goes with who you are and what you do. Your father was a commando.
He was, yeah. He was a Royal Marine commando. He was also a great dad.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he sadly died too young, age 66. And, you know, that's been a sadness, to be honest, in my life.
Yes.
But I know he would love our 3 Shara and my 3 boys. But, you know, I suppose there's a great hope of heaven is that he's actually cheering us on.
Absolutely.
And you know what, I feel it often. I really do. There's not many days I don't think of my dad. And as a dad myself now, I kind of look back and he was such a wonderful father, you know, and that you can't take that for granted in this world. And he, you know, so many of the early adventures of my life were with him.
Yes.
You know, climbing on the little kind of chalk sea cliffs on the Isle of Wight, and fun connection and tinkering around in boats always. And I don't know, he always used to say to me when I came back from school is that you don't have to be the best, you know, and that wasn't common because everyone was always school was always very pushy, and he never really cared about the kind of grades. He cared about the effort, and he cared if I had a few good friends and I was trying my best and try and be kind along the way. And I look back and he was ahead of his time in those values.
But I think but you're an action man, but you've always appeared, as I've know what I know about your life, Bear. Even in your teenage years, you learned to skydive. You were black belt in karate. So have you always been an action man?
Well, I'm not sure I see it as an action man. I see it, to be honest, the roots of it was the only stuff I was any good at. I wasn't a superstar at school. You know, I wasn't the sportiest, I wasn't the cleverest, I wasn't the best looking. You know, it's just like you would have lost me in a crowd. And I don't know, I think it's one thing I've loved about adventure all my life. It's a great leveler. The wild doesn't judge, you know. I don't know, it just felt natural to me, and my dad loved it, and it's what we did. And, you know, the martial arts, I kind of just got into that and then loved that, and the climbing. And as soon as I was allowed to, I was jumping out of planes. And I don't know, I think if you could say to that young boy now that he could have that as his job, I would have gone, come on, you know. So I feel very lucky that essentially that has stayed my job over the years.
Now, after school, you applied for the SAS, and that was a very grueling experience, and you were not accepted. Was that a huge disappointment?
Well, I failed selection first time round.
That's right.
And yeah, that was hard because I'd kind of dropped out of university. I'd dropped out of everything, really. I was kind of picked this path less trodden. I was trying to join as a trooper, as a private soldier, and everyone was like pretty. I don't know. I just felt I burned a lot of bridges, But my best friend said to me at the time, when I remember just being devastated after failing that first time, he said, "All God's callings have a birth, a death, and a resurrection."
Yes.
And I've always remembered that ever since. And it's been applied to so much of my life, actually. I see that truth come round time and time again. And, that encouraged me. And I went back, I tried a second time. And this time, out of the 120 of us stood there on day one, they said there'll only be 4 of you probably at the end. And this time I was like laser focused and bit of luck as well, and got there and was one of those 4 at the end.
Well, not just Bear, not just that. There was, I gather, on the last walk through the night and the cold, your friend, who was also with you in that first time that you attempted SAS, he was reciting scriptures.
Well, it was amazing because I did it. I did selection with my best friend to this day. Still, I saw him yesterday. He's still my best friend. We're godparents to each other's children. An incredible man. And when we turned up that first time, and that 120 of us were lined up, they said, and they noticed we were friends because we were like this, stood next to each other, and they said, "Don't bother having, don't you want to be careful of the friendships because the likelihood of the both of you passing at that pass rate, when we're going to end up with 4 of you, you're not going to both be here." And it's like, I didn't know any other way to be. I needed him more than anything, so we did stick together. We both failed first time and both passed second time. And, he's been just such a rocket in my life. But I do remember really well, he is a man of faith, and he's been a great sort of friend in Christ as well over the years. And I just remember that last one, it's a 60-kilometer final endurance march on what they call test week, which is like this sort of hell week of selection. It's winter, 6-foot deep snow in the mountains. We're 24 hours into this thing, pretty broken at this stage. And we're going up this valley in the mountains, and it's notoriously called VW Valley, Voluntary Withdrawal Valley, because it's the one that breaks everyone at the end. And I just remember being on his, in his slipstream in the snow, in the middle of the night, just hearing him mumbling under his breath, "Even youths grow tired and weary, but those that hope on the Lord will renew their strength." And I don't know many Bible verses, but that one's in my heart now. It's like that's ingrained in there. Those that hope on the Lord renew their strength.
Absolutely.
And it's try to keep it as a mantra for life. Yeah,
I know. Now, you did join the SAS, and one day you jumped out of an aeroplane and your parachute didn't open. And was it around 16,000 feet?
Well, that was a bad day in my kind of army career, obviously, and it was life hits you sometimes left field, doesn't it? And I broke my back in 3 places and should have been paralyzed. And
when you were Bear, when you were coming down and your parachute hadn't opened, can you remember what you were thinking?
I think I was just madly trying to sort it out and thinking I could sort this out. There were a few curse words in there as well. It was like, I don't know, I thought I was going to die, But sometimes these left field things that hit us, it's not the end, isn't it? Is it?
But you broke 3 vertebrae, and the doctors didn't think you'd ever walk again.
Yeah, that's right. And then I spent many months back in the UK in military rehabilitation, and you try and claw back your confidence and your physicality. And for me, that hope, I suppose, it's why that I don't take that verse we just said for granted. It's been a guiding light for me through many dark times, but my faith is something I held on to there. My family were wonderful. And I think my goal was just I was going to get strong enough to one day climb again. That would have been such a big part of my job as a soldier. And that was the focus. I was going to one day be able to climb again.
And your father put a poster of Mount Everest in your room so you could look at it. And you did recover.
Yeah.
And then 18 months later, you were one of the youngest people to climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, I was. I had a brilliant team with me. 4 of the climbers that were on the mountain with never came home. 2
Yes.
died of the cold, 2 fell. But 2 of us from our team made it, and I don't know, that mountain is a very humbling place, to be honest. And it changed, like I said, it changed my life in so many ways. I came back, I left the military and wrote a book on what happened up there, and that was opened the door to TV. And it was like, I felt in a way it was like my dad's parting gift of like, here you go, you're going to get a chance here, you're going to get a little break, and now it's up to you what you make of it.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your faith. I know you had a faith as a child, and then you went off to school and got a little bit disillusioned. And then while you were at school, one of these teachers told you about your godfather who had passed away, and then you went and sat in a tree. Tell us that story.
Well, like you say, I've always feel I had a natural faith as a young kid. Like I knew there was something out there, and I knew it was good. And I don't know. I think because my sister was older, I spent quite a lot of time on my own, and I just kind of knew that there was something out there that was with me always. And I don't know, I couldn't articulate it more than that. And then when I went to school, and suddenly it was formalized, and you had to go to church, and I just thought, wow, God obviously wears a white dress and speaks in Latin, and and I kind of let it go because I thought that was childish faith before, of like this beautiful light that's always with us. And but when my godfather died, he was like a second father to me. He was like my dad's best friend. He spent so much time with us, and I just remember being just devastated and going down the end of the school grounds and finding this tree and just wanting to be on my own and sitting in it and saying what is essentially a really, I mean, it's a prayer, but it doesn't sound like a prayer. But I just said, God, please be with me. Please be with me. And, it didn't even have an amen. And, but, that is a prayer of salvation. It's a prayer that God never, ever fails to answer. And nothing dramatic happened, but little things began to, it's like small acorns, big oak trees grow, and things began to happen. And that light and that presence of the Almighty has never left me since. My faith wanders up and down, left and right, doubts, struggles, but the presence of the Almighty in my heart has never failed me. And it's why I hold on in my faith to simple things like that verse, that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Simple things, simple truths. And I think the more I've learned about Jesus, the more I realize he wants us to keep it simple. He loved people who had that sort of faith. And I cling on to that a lot as well, is that I don't need to complicate it. And there's much theology and doctrine I don't understand. And I've learned that that's okay. Just cling on to Jesus through this battles and the journey of life. And that's how I choose to live my life. It's how I look back and I realize how my dad lived his life. I mean, I remember finding a little handwritten prayer in the drawer of his desk after he died, and he wrote it on a post-it note saying, Lord, be with me, today is really busy. And I like that. I hold on to things like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Bear. Now, your new book, The Greatest Story Ever Told. Absolutely incredible. Now, I've written a book about Jesus. So having written a book about Jesus and then read your book about Jesus, it's like, well, okay, am I going to learn anything new here? And it is very refreshing, and your perspective is, it's gripping. But okay, what prompted you to write this book? You've written over 100 books. What makes this book special?
Well, I think my first thought was that coming to the realization one day that nobody had ever done this. Nobody had ever written the New Testament, the 4 Gospels, as one linear story told as a thriller, but absolutely accurately without changing any of the actual dialogue words of Jesus. I thought it's like, for us, if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, it's like honey. It's beautiful. It's like, but if you don't know it in your heart, it can be quite hard for people to read. It's very straight. It's very, that's part of its beauty. It says Jesus was taken to the place of Golgotha and crucified. Boom, done. It is written like that. And, for us, it's the silences in between everything, isn't it? It's like the little touches that bring it alive. But I wanted to tell the story of Christ to a whole new generation in a totally fresh, new way that had never been done before. And also I thought it's shocking how many of us don't know the story. Even those of us who have a Christian faith, we tend to know stories, like the Good Samaritan, or we've heard it at a wedding or a funeral or a reading. We know stories, but we don't always know the whole story. And the more I kind of got into it, the more I realized it is absolutely radical. I mean, here was a warrior. This was not the Jesus and meek and mild sort of, white liberal sanitized Christmas version of Jesus. This was like hardcore. And I just thought so few people know it. And it is transformational for how we live our lives once you get into it. That it is the perfect model for humility, love, leadership, friendship. It's like, it is the greatest story ever told. It's not could be the greatest story ever told, or maybe, if this is true, it changes everything. And I think that was the point. People will already, I'm getting letters from all around the world already, and just saying, first of all, I had no idea. I get this sentence a lot. I had no idea, and this changes everything. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I've had that same, basically those same words already about 100 times. And it's like, wow, if I'm getting it already, I know this is going to touch people. And it's a story that's changed my life. And you want to try and spread love and goodness in the world at a time where the world is very volatile. So, and also the other thing is on my heart. It was like, I knew I got up in the morning, and it was a case of like, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, it was like, I've never had that before in my life. It was like, clear the decks. You're building your ark. Here we go. And it was also the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, it really was. I mean, forget Everest or the SAS, they're a walk in the park. This was hard. It was hard here. It was hard here. It was hard full stop. But I had brilliant theologians and guides around me. And it was one of the first things I did was bring in a team there. And part of them were from The Chosen in America, this TV show. And we'd just finished filming a bespoke season of Running Wild with The Chosen team, with The Chosen cast. And that comes out early next year. And it's a beautiful sort of runner show I did with them. But it gave me access to these brilliant theologians who helped me so much make it absolutely right.
What I love about the book, Bear, is that you don't change any of the words of Jesus that are recorded in the Gospels. And obviously that's very deliberate, isn't it?
Well, that was the one thing. That was the one that my heart felt two things. One, write this book. No ifs, buts, later. Nah, write the book. That was the first thing. And the second thing is, don't change a single word. We use, that Jesus said, and we use different translations. And it was actually became one of the hardest things, because sometimes when it's flowing, the story's going this way and that way, and it's like, but it kept coming to me like, don't you dare move that comma, let alone add a word or a the or an a or an and, not even. And so I didn't. And it's like, I'm really pleased, it just works like that. And I know I'm really, really genuine.
Yes.
I'm so proud of this. And I can sit with total beautiful confidence behind this book that it stands up. And, that's a really lovely feeling, because I didn't want to screw this up. This is his story, it's history.
Well, you definitely, Bear, you haven't. You haven't. Now, you tell the story through the eyes of 5 different people. Now, tell us why you did that, and who are the 5 people?
Well, the reason I wanted to do that is that it then becomes all of our stories. Because whether we're the skeptic, whether we're the broken, whether we're the scared, in pain, whether we're in the impetuous, whether we're doubting, whether we're unsure, so I write it from, first of all, it starts from his mother Mary, who, again, we get this image of the Virgin Mary and it's all very angelic and kind of, but actually she was just poor, young, terrified, but faithful.
Yeah.
And her story is incredible. Imagine that, having a baby out of wedlock in those times and being on the run and being hunted down by the most fearsome dictator of the day and, fleeing for your life to a foreign country. And, so it starts off innocent, but also quite full on with her. And then it goes to who we call Taum. So we call everyone by their sort of Aramaic names. And again, even Jesus is Yeshua through this, because I didn't want anyone to come with any preconceptions to this story. I don't want people to go, oh, that's Thomas, he's a doubting guy, or he's the Mary's that. I want a blank slate. Let me take you on a journey here because it will change your life. But Thomas is super skeptical. Taum's very skeptical. And, he sees that wedding at Cana, which is how the Mary section ends. But it starts with him going, it would take more than a magic trick to change my mind. And then it goes to Peter, who's this impetuous, wild, raw, heart-led man of the land and the sea. He's a fisherman. And then it goes to John, and then it eventually goes to Mary Magdalene, who, again, is very broken when she encounters Jesus as a teenager. And she's just all heart and instinct, and he changes her life, and she takes us through the brutal end and the hopeful finish of the book. So, but like I said, it's all of our stories wrapped up, and I think it works really, actually beautifully, having these different perspectives, because, again, people write to me, they relate to so different parts of different sections, and that's the goal.
Yeah, and tell us, how did you write it? Because I know there were nights when you would just, even after a day's work, you'd go back and write all through the night.
Well, it was funny because my heart was saying, write it, do it now. It was like, don't. It was like, okay. It was like I literally pressed new. Here we go. I didn't know where to begin. And anyway, we gathered this team, and then first thing I did was get a really good editor guy who just did the timeline, worked with Andrew Ollerton, the theologian,
Yes.
the main theologian I worked with, who worked with him. Craig and him worked together, and they did this timeline, and we picked the stories we wanted. He gave me this skeleton, and then I started writing, and it's like, I was filming in the jungle at the time. I was with my son. We were staying in a little lodge. We were there for a month, filming every day, and we were sharing a little, bedroom together, and he'd come in at 11 o'clock and I'd be on the floor on some cushions writing. He'd say goodnight. And then we were up early because we were sort of jungle filming hours. We'd be up at like 5. And a bunch of times he'd come through and I'd still be writing. And he goes, Dad, are you on drugs or something?
Yes.
It's like, you need to sleep. And it was like, it came. And I got it down that first draft fast. And that was like pouring out of me. It really was. But then the hard bit really was working then over draft after draft after draft with the theologians to get this absolutely right. Because as you know, I was reading 300-page books on just the encounter between Peter and Jesus on the beach at the end after the resurrection, and I could pick up another 300-page book on the playful nature of Jesus with the Samaritan woman at the well. Everything is so nuanced, and I didn't want any of the authors of these sort of books to read these encounters and go, you got the encounter, but you've missed the nuance of this bit. I kind of like, so it really was, that was a hard work bit. And like I say, a brilliant team of people and actually they are the unsung heroes behind this book. I've said at the beginning, this isn't my book. This is all of our book, because this is our chance to share the story of Jesus, that Jesus had changed us, to share that light and love with millions of people. And that is my goal for the book, every person on the planet to read it. Can't do that alone.
Because you want people to be introduced to the real Jesus.
I do, because I went through such a journey of my life of leading so much of it on my own, because I'd been blinded by kind of religion, inverted commas, and that's one of the great tragedies of life, because the heart of the Christian faith is a relationship with the Almighty that is raw, free, honest, empowering, and life-giving. And that is, I never meet anyone who doesn't want that. Why would I don't care who you are? I don't care whether you're a refugee from wherever or a CEO over here. I don't care who you are in the world. I can look them in the eye and say, do you want to find home? Do you want to find love and peace and freedom in your heart? Do you want to be empowered beyond yourself? There's no one on this planet who's going to say no. It's like, but we get clouded by what we think religion is, which is stuff nobody wants. It's a lifetime journey of unwinding that, and to realize the baby's different from the bathwater. Often we see the dirty bathwater because we're human, we're flawed. We don't make actually very good churches. There's some beautiful churches, but it's always going to be a pale reflection on Christ. What we want to focus on in life is loving other people with all our hearts, and being connected to the Almighty with all our hearts, and the rest is kind of detail.
Absolutely. Well, Bear, amongst all the other things that you do globally, that you've made it a priority to tell the story of Jesus, and that is highly commendable. And we pray that this will introduce many people around the world to Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. Bear, you're an absolute tonic, and we're so grateful that you've joined us on Facing the Canon. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're so kind, and you're a great man, J.John. And we've known each other for many years, and I salute you for your kind of faithfulness and your vision, your energy, and everything you give to many, many people, of which there are many things people don't know about. And I hear that about you. You do these things that people wouldn't know about, that just serve and support people. And more and more in my life, I recognize the real, true heroes. You're one of them.
Oh,
keep going.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Thank you so much, Bear. I hope that's inspired you. I'm always inspired when I talk to Bear. Can I encourage you to read his book, The Greatest Story Ever Told, to gain a new insight and a new perspective on Jesus? Thank you for joining us on Facing the Canon. Please join us again.